other people can hear you because we're going to be asking you some great questions. Yeah, and I just want to make sure people can hear you. Debbie Treadwell is an equine business insurance specialist, and this is what she does for a living. She loves horses, she shows horses, and she sells business insurance to people that every part of the industry. And I believe she does in 49 states across the country too. So we're going to have her talk a little bit about everything. Debbie, go ahead and say hi so we can hear what the sound sounds like.
Okay, hello. Can you hear me better?
If you guys are watching, if anyone's watching us, let us know if you can hear, because I happen to have a big mouth and I'm loud. So Debbie, you sound a little bit quiet. Can people hear her?
I am going to interject. I believe that maybe there's just Sherry and Debbie on this. I don't know that it's opened to everybody. Even though it says live, we only have one viewer. And there's only 2 people in the room. So I don't know if we have to send the link to everybody or not.
It doesn't say live, like to live to the public?
It says live, so maybe it's live to the public. So I just don't know if they're there. Because we did take, 20 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, maybe everybody probably
went to see it later because she gets a lot of people viewing it after the fact.
And maybe people went to go eat dinner. Whatever. I'm sorry this took so long. Trish, let me know if more people hop on.
I definitely will.
It says we're actually live though.
It says live.
Okay. Well, we're going to go for it. We're going to make the best of it. You know what? This is part of life. Things kind of get crazy. Oh yeah, Trish, find out if we're live.
You're totally live.
We're totally live. Okay, if you guys know we're live, jump on because we're going to talk about stuff, equine insurance. Debbie, are you ready to rock and roll?
Yep, I'm all set.
Okay, if we have a little problem with your sound, okay. So I'm not sure. Oh, you know what? It might be my computer. People out there, if you hear her, let us know if you can hear Debbie real good. It might be that my volume's turned down too.
Okay.
On this.
Yeah, I think I just have.
Okay. So Debbie, say something now.
Okay.
We got you. Woohoo! We are ready to rock and roll. Okay, oh. Debbie's from Minnesota, and tell us about yourself and how you got into selling equine business insurance, and kind of we'll start with that.
Okay, well, I was graduating from college. Oh boy, I got a headline.
Can you hear?
You're a little garbled. I'm not sure. Someone else can hear, so that's
yay.
Good.
Okay, tell us again because I couldn't hear you, Debbie. You kind of are garbled. Your sound.
Okay, so I'm going to move my camera closer.
Okay.
Does that sound any better?
We are such a professional outfit here. I love it. Hello. We should be on nightly TV. Okay, go ahead and go when you're ready.
Can you hear me any better now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, all right. I moved my webcam a little closer, so hopefully that helps here.
Perfect,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess, when I was graduating college, I thought, what am I going to do? My whole life has been horses. I need to have a career that's going to keep me involved with horse people. So I was thinking photography, accounting, pharmaceutical sales rep, work at a tax store, whatever. Anyhow, I ended up in insurance. So here I am and love it. And I just think it's great because I get to talk to horse people every single day. So it's fun.
Awesome. And you also have horses of your own?
Yep, I do. We have I grew up with horses, had horses since I could walk, did the 4-H thing when I was a kid, did, a lot of open shows, WSCA shows, and then as I got older, went into breed shows, and then went into, college, and I worked at in different states in California, Arizona, and Minnesota, big, very prestigious horse farms. And then got married to a horse person. My husband loves horses as well. And then had kids. Awesome. And my family, my daughter loves horses. We show together. We're always traveling the country and doing things together whenever we can get away. So it's a lot of fun.
Oh,
we enjoy it.
That's so cool. Very cool. Very cool. So the thing is, what I wanted to tell people that watch this show is I get a lot of people that contact me, and actually one of the biggest questions I get asked a lot is about insurance. And the one thing I want to share with you, Debbie, and the people who are listening is the crazy part about it was when we first built our barn 16 years ago, I honestly didn't know who to go to for insurance for our whole facility. And I've kind of learned the hard way. I found out after going through 2 insurance companies who really were not agricultural or equine insurance companies at all. I found out years later when I finally hooked up with an equine insurance carrier, I really realized that the people I was working with before didn't understand the industry, and I really didn't have the correct insurance. They didn't even know what care, if they're not a horse person, then when you say I need care, custody, and control insurance, they look at you and they said, well, can you explain that to me? And you know right away there's a problem. And so I now tell people it's so important to find an insurance carrier, someone who, this is what they do for a living because they understand the industry. And what do you say about, I would imagine you get all kinds of people calling you, because I know I talk to people all the time that don't even know where to go to get insurance. Do you see this a lot where people are struggling to find out what kind of insurance they need for training, for boarding?
Yep, all the time. And the interesting thing is every company, I mean, we're brokers, so we work with about, I don't know, I have 10 to 20 companies that I can write farms with. So we don't use just one company. So not every company is going to be, the same one I would recommend for every person. It depends on the situation. The care, custody, and control coverage, of course, if people don't know, will cover your legal liability in the event of death or injury to a horse you do not own. And most companies have a flat rate for up to 20 horses, and you can pick from a minimum value of $5,000 all the way up to $500,000 or more, depending on your circumstances. And the other thing you have to be careful of is some companies will limit, if you haul horses for other people to horse shows or events or whatever it might be, they might limit the radius of operations. So you might have to pay a little more to get coverage beyond 100 miles from your farm. So
and will you explain about care, custody, and control, that so the reason it's so important to have it if you're caring for other people's horses that you do not own is because in the event that a mistake happens or a horse dies and that person who owns a horse feels that you're negligent as the caretaker of the horse, you need some protection, correct? Right.
And the care, custody, and control will provide your legal defense for you. And then if you are found liable, they will pay for, up to the specified limit per horse. It's up to the owner of the horse to prove the value of the horse at the time of the claim. For injuries or death, I mean, the worst care, custody, and control claim we ever had was where a barn fire. And, about 20 horses died in the fire, and all the owners came back and said, okay, I didn't have insurance, or I didn't have enough insurance, and now you need to pay the difference. Or the mortality insurance company can come back and subrogate against you as the farm owner if you were negligent in the fire. So
wow. And is care, custody, and control also for trainers?
Yes.
So
trainers,
if they are training horses, then they need that kind of insurance for that care for the horses that are in their care while they're training?
Yes, or hauling them to shows or events, either way.
Yep. See, I did not know, because we have the trainers here all have liability insurance, and in order to train out of our barn, but I carry the care, custody, and control for the horses here on the property. But if a trainer has a horse at a show, then they should have their own care, custody, and control, or if they're hauling.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Yes.
That's good to know. And it's sad because a lot of trainers, well, they can't work out of our barn unless they have the proper insurance. There's a lot of trainers out there training without insurance. Would you say that's true?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, especially the fly-by. I don't want to say fly-by-night, but the ones that will move from one facility to another very frequently. And there are some facilities that follow up and make sure they have, the adequate insurance and that they've maintained it. Because sometimes these things, I've seen them buy a policy and then let it lapse and they don't keep it in force. And then the farm owner is thinking good, and in reality, the policy has lapsed and they don't always have the coverage. So
yeah, it's crazy. So I had a couple questions here, but there's a lot of ways to go on this, and I know we have an hour, and but one of the things that I feel, will you explain, because I can't tell you how many people will call me and ask me about consulting for their stable. And the first thing, it's very common. I mean, it was done when I was a kid, and you hear about it at every stable. And I'll admit, I did it also when we first opened because I didn't know better, is a lot of people will ask to barter. They'll do chores for reduced board. I don't do that anymore. I learned, but a lot of people don't understand that as the barn owner, if you have people doing chores, even though you're quote bartering for help, like to clean stalls, if someone gets hurt, the barn owner is still liable. Can you walk us through that? Did you hear me,
yeah,
Debbie?
it can be certainly a situation. I can. Can you hear me okay?
Okay, yeah, you cut out for a minute.
Yeah.
You're good.
Okay, all right. So a lot of time, that's very common in the industry, of course, but what I recommend to anybody doing that is that they buy a workers' compensation policy, just because there is an employee-employer relationship there. And if you ever have control over somebody, they can establish that employer-employee relationship. And if they're hurt, they're going to come after you. And you need to have a work comp policy to help protect yourself for their injuries. So, and they will establish, the value, based on the value of the services that they're doing. If you're exchanging them cleaning stalls every day in exchange for a month's board, then that's the value of their wages and their payroll.
Okay, so the way I do it is I don't do any bartering. Instead, I pay an hourly wage. I have workers' comp, and I just give them a paycheck at the end of the month. And then if they want to turn around and, deposit that money in their account and pay me for my board, they're still getting a reduced board because I've paid them. But I like to keep things pretty clean as far as hours and who's worked what. But you're saying that if you barter, if you have workman's comp, you can still do it that way, but is it a little bit more gray area when you do it that way?
It is, and it's up to the auditor when they come out to, do the audit at the end of a work comp policy, how they want to handle that. Typically, they will, ask for the value of those services, and they may add it into the audit at that time.
Awesome. Okay, great. That's really good to know, because I've always done it. Now I should say. When we first opened 16 years ago, I did a trade and board too. I quit that after a couple of years after I was learning. But workman's comp, I know I've talked to other barn owners and they're kind of scared about it. And I said, well, it sounds like a big thing, but it's really not, because they figure it out according to what you're going to be paying out per year in employees. And some people get totally overwhelmed by it, and I always tell them, and they're nervous to pay for it. They think it's going to be over expensive, and I tell them it's not. You just have to ask the right people so you get the right answers, and so that you don't get overwhelmed by it. And so that's what I tell people, is to call, people like you, call and ask how workman's comp comes out. I don't want to go into all the rates of it, but I know since David and I work full-time here at our barn, we have employees, but they don't work a whole lot. They're not full-time. And I only pay about $950 a year for workers' comp.
Okay. Yeah.
And because we don't pay out a lot, what I mean? We're paying ourselves because it's my full-time job. But is that correct? It goes according to how much you're paying out in employees?
It's all payroll driven and experience driven. So the higher your payroll, the more you're going to pay on the premium side. And then they also look at your experience. If you have the frequency and the severity of your claims that you may have, may come into play as well. And they may put a debit on your policy if you have a lot of claims or frequency. But on the flip side, if you have good experience with no claims, you can get a credit on your policy. So
that's good to know. I don't think I've ever had any claims. I wonder if I've ever gotten a credit. I'll have to look.
yeah, you would have to look at the policy and look for what they call an experience modification factor.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. I didn't even know that.
Yep.
Okay. So we have a question that came in, and I want to run it by you. This is from someone that emailed me. And the first and foremost important is insurance for horse shows at a private barn. They want to put on horse shows at a stable where they work. They do not own the barn, but they are running it, and they want to put these horse shows on. What does insurance look like for that?
You can buy what they call horse show event liability policies, and it's, they're really economical. I mean, some companies are as low as $150 a day. Sometimes they're like $300 minimum, depends on the event and what's going on, how many days long it is. But yeah, you can buy a special policy and then name the landowner as an additional insured so that the landowner is covered for the event under that policy.
Okay. Now, additionally insured, that was something too that my insurance carrier, for all the trainers that come here to our barn, on their insurance policy, it has to have David and Sherry Grunska and Vinland Stables additionally insured. And I know some people don't realize that you have to make sure you have everything kind of in place with that. Is that what you guys recommend too?
Yes. I always recommend, regardless of what company I'm using to write a farm policy, I recommend that. It really depends on the situation. I should clarify that though, because if I've got some independents that are exclusively working for one trainer, and then sometimes we'll add that independent to the trainer policy, but if they are going, from different barns to, different events and working for multiple different people or even people on their own premises, then they need their own policy. Because if they're added as an additional insured to the farm policy, they, unless the named insured, being the farm owner, is also found negligent and sued, that independent really has no coverage under that policy.
Okay. So now my other question is for trainers. I think one of the people last week or the week before asked, and I said, well, we have to ask you because I wasn't sure the answer. What do you recommend? I've seen it done both ways at stables where, so for instance, all the trainers that come to our barn are independent. They're independent contractors. They carry their own insurance, and I do not get paid from them. But I've also gone to barns where the trainers are employees of the barn owner. And so how does that look for insurance for the trainers? Who is carrying the insurance when the trainers are actually employed by the barn?
If they're a true employee by the barn, then the farm owner will carry the insurance and include training and riding lessons under the farm policy.
And they carry it. The trainer doesn't carry anything like that then?
Not if they're a true employee. They wouldn't need to. They'd be automatically covered.
Okay. And it was kind of interesting. So I had this happen to me a couple of years ago. We had a person who, they're no longer at our barn, but we had a person who had found a horse trainer, and she had a younger horse, and she wanted to bring the trainer to our barn to help her with her younger horse. And the trainer did not have insurance. And so I said that they could not work out of our barn until they got the proper insurance. And what the trainer said to me was, that's not my responsibility, that's yours. And I said to them, no, it's yours because you're independent, you are not working for me. Well, I find, has that been a pattern that a lot of trainers use or have used over the last 20 years? And it's something that I think I'm hoping to educate people and realize how it works when you're a barn owner and when you're a trainer. I don't want to cause problems because the two need each other. We need the trainers in our barn. They keep our barn safe. They're a wonderful asset. they also need us for the facility if they don't have their own facility, but sometimes it seems like there's been things that have fallen through the cracks over the last 20 years. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of trainers that might think that, but they have to realize that if they cause some, if they're found, liable for injury to a person, a rider, they're going to go after that trainer. They may come after you as well, but they're primarily going after the trainer if it was during a riding lesson or something.
Yeah.
Working with that student during the lesson, they're the ones found that should be found liable. And, legally obligated. So they need their own insurance, in place.
And let's say someone gets really hurt in a lesson, a serious, something really serious. I know in the past, we've had a couple riders, years ago, we've had twice where the ambulance had to come out and because riders got really hurt. And they had to go to the hospital. Thank goodness they were fine, but some injuries. And it was funny because the insurance company, even though a trainer was involved and the person fell off their horse and got hurt, the insurance company was sending me letters as the barn owner. And I feel like that's kind of what they're going to also go to the person who owns the property. Would you say that's standard practice?
Yes, it is. I see it happen a lot. So then what you need to do is you turn in the claim to your insurance carrier on the farm, and they'll investigate and most likely deny it. And then once you get that denial letter, either that person will go to their own health insurance or they'll go after the trainer.
Yeah. And in both cases, nothing happened with me. They couldn't come after us. We were fine. Yeah. But that's what I try to tell people in my workshops and when I talk to people is you have to realize that even it could be the nicest person in the world, and that person who owned the horse that fell off, they have maybe no intention of coming after you, but you can't control what happens with the companies, the insurance companies, everything after that.
Right.
Okay. I was just I was wondering about that.
Yep, that's absolutely correct.
Okay. Now, one of the things I kind of wanted to talk about is, can you tell us, I have a lot of people that watch the board horses, probably the majority of people that watch the show, and for the horse owners, can you tell me what your thoughts are for carrying mortality insurance for horse owners? Because horse owners, once in a while I'll get someone who comes to our barn, they're new, and in our boarding contract, it clearly states that we don't carry mortality insurance for their horses, but they don't understand how that all works. Do you carry mortality insurance?
Yeah, I do. I sell mortality insurance. I mean, all over the world. I've sold, in Europe, Brazil, everywhere, United States. I carried on my own horses. I mean, and depending on the company with the mortality side, you can get, the free colic surgery too, which is nice. So, depending on the carrier you use, you can get between $3,500 in free colic and up to $10,000 in free colic. On the horses. So it's really nice for them to have their own policy on that to help pay for medical expenses and, if something, happens to the horse. Or anything.
Great. So they can just call you too. So you do that besides equine businesses. Now, what about with equine businesses? Because I'll work with a lot of different barns, and some of them like us are a general multidiscipline barn. We have all different kinds of people here. And then you might go to a stable that is big, and maybe they do a lot of jumping, a lot of what some people would say high risk activities. When you go and you're going to do a policy for a farm, does it depend on what the activities are?
About as far as a hunter jumper barn versus say a Western pleasure barn, no difference in rate.
Okay.
But if you start talking vaulting, yes.
Vaulting you would?
Like vaulting is really a little more difficult to insure. There are very few companies
Really?
that. So, but your main ring, you know, riding programs and disciplines are pretty easy, and you know, there's no difference in rate depending on what you're doing.
Really? See now, and I didn't know that. I mean, because we have people doing all different stuff here, but I just assume that if you have a barn where you have people jumping pretty high, higher competition, you know, stuff like that, you know, the risk, you know, eventing, maybe the risk is going to be higher, but vaulting would be the way. I didn't know that. Do you know what vaulting is?
I do not know.
Okay, I gotta tell what Trish, my dear friend, I'm gonna tell. Vaulting is when they do like almost like a little bit of gymnastics on the back of a horse while the horse canters in a circle.
Oh yeah.
Have you ever seen that?
Yeah,
like in
yeah.
competition? It's really cool.
Mhm.
And I just never realized because I mean, obviously I can't do it, but it doesn't. The horse usually is going so slow. You wouldn't think.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so steady. But that one's harder to insure, huh?
Yep, that one. And if you start talking like an account that's doing hay rides or, you know, public, you know, drawn vehicle rides, you know, public trail rides, birthday parties, those kinds of activities, a lot of policies actually have exclusions written into the policy for those activities. So you have to be careful.
Okay. So I know when we have special events here at our barn, I pay extra for those events, like clinics, to make sure I have extra coverage for the clinics we have, or we do like once every couple of years, we'll do a large indoor tax sale, and our whole arena will be full of people, and I'll do extra insurance for that.
Yep.
And different things like that. I found it interesting when I have to renew mine every year. There's a questionnaire that the person I work with fills out, and they'll ask, I want to talk about dogs because dogs always seem to be a hot button topic, and I've heard horror stories of situations that have happened with dogs. We had some situations years ago. We don't allow dogs in our barn at all. And I've actually had boarders leave because they were offended that I could not let them bring their dog. They wanted to be in a barn where their dogs could run wild, and we don't allow that here because of the risk. The insurance carrier also will ask me every year what kind of dog we own and, you know, what kind of dogs are on the property. Can you explain about the whole dog thing? Because I've heard some stories from other barns where a dog has bitten someone, or a horse kicked a dog, and then the boarders were arguing because the horse killed the dog.
Ooh.
What's your thoughts about dogs?
I mean, I love dogs. I don't know how you can live on a farm and not have a dog. You know, we all do. But if I owned a boarding facility and I had people coming and going, I would say no dogs. I am aware of some very popular companies that have an exclusion built into their stable liability and farm policy that excludes all liability for non-owned dogs. So if a non-owned dog comes on and hurts, you know, somebody or causes a horse to spook and a rider falls off, you have no coverage.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't think a lot of people understand the risk involved with that. I love dogs too. We have a dog, and when we decided that no dogs were allowed in the barn years ago, I couldn't, you know, everyone loves the whole idea of, you know, like you see in movies, you know, there you go riding into the sunset with your dog by your side, you know, following along. But the problem is that a lot of people's dogs are not horse trained.
Right.
Or they get to the barn and they see a cat and they take off after the cat, and in the process they spook a horse and someone's on the horse and a rider falls off.
Yep.
And I also know one barn in the area a few years ago, they had to change their ruling and no dogs because a dog took off at a horse show and spooked a bunch of horses and stuff, and it was kind of a disaster. So I just was wondering about that. Is there a premium depending on what dogs the owners of the barn own?
Usually it's just an eligibility, criteria in underwriting guidelines. Most farms are not going to get that concerned about it. They're either going to say, we're okay with dogs or we're not. I've had people call me over the years that have been canceled by companies because of a dog situation, and I've been able to get coverage, because not every company is that concerned about it. They may ask a few questions, but they're just going to say, usually they want to know, like, okay, if you have dogs, how many, what the breed is, and have they had any bite claims? And if they have had any bite claims, they'll continue to ask more questions. Do you still own the dog? Is the dog locked up when customers are on the premises? Have they had any further issues with bite claims? Things like that. There's usually a way around it. So.
Yeah, I was just curious because I know, we don't allow dogs either. It just seems like it's always been kind of a hassle.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, so this is another question that we had from someone. If I am the barn owner and I am going to retire and I'm going to lease out my barn, who carries, like if someone else is going to use the entire barn and run their business out of it, and you're collecting so much a month for them to actually work out of your barn, just like if you were to take at a strip mall and rent out a little, area to sell clothes or something. How does the insurance work for the barn owner? At that point, do I still need to carry the care, custody, and control, or does the person who is renting my barn have to carry all that?
If you are completely leasing the facility out and have no involvement with the day-to-day operations, the person leasing the barn should have all that coverage. The stable liability, the care, custody, and control, boarding liability, everything for riding lessons and training. And then they should list you on the policy as an additional insured.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so I would just carry regular insurance for people on my property and for the buildings.
Just for the buildings and the premises liability. Yeah.
Okay.
That's if you don't live there.
Well, what if I live here though?
Then if you live there,
when I retire.
Well, then if you live there, you would want to make sure it includes personal liability too, besides this liability.
I don't plan on moving, but I often wonder, down the road when David and I decide to, I don't know, retire. Does that happen when you live on a farm? Do you ever retire? But
Yeah.
When we decide not to do the workload so much, I just was kind of curious on that, because I always thought that was interesting, the dynamics of how it all works. And I think, what time is it? Because I know we're super late tonight.
We're 35 minutes into this video.
Okay.
But it is 7:30.
Okay. We're probably going to go a little bit more, and then I think we'll probably call it out, since we're kind of I'm sorry about the beginning. It got a little rough. I don't know how we got all messed up there. But I know with our insurance, how do you guys normally bill people? Because someone will ask, and we always pay ours in the first 6 months. So then the second 6 months of the year, we don't owe anything for insurance.
Okay. Well, we work with 10 to 12 15 different companies. So every company
depends on the company.
Yeah, they all have their own plans.
Okay.
And then some people also do the escrow billing through the mortgage company. So we always, we can make that work too.
Okay. Will you tell everybody, what's the name of the company you work for and the website? Because I think that's really important. Because I know, honestly, I can't tell you how many times people say, who can you recommend for a provider? And the other part of it is too, I'm asking you two things at once right now, is I know trainers who have come here and were looking for insurance, they've tried to do it online, and it seemed like they had a struggle. And when they call your company, would they talk to you in person? So would you give us the lowdown of like your website and everything about, how to get in touch with you?
Yep. Okay. So I work for McNamara Company, and we're an independent agency licensed in 49 states. We do all kinds of insurance, but my niche, one of them, is horses, because of my involvement with horses, and I'm just such a passionate horse person. And So I have a separate website called buyhorseinsurance.com, and I have a lot of information on there with some applications. The site is a little outdated. I need to update it. I need to find somebody to do that, but I haven't had time. But if a trainer calls me, I usually get some information, basic information as far as the number of students that they have, that they work with per week on an average, how many horses they have, what their disciplines are, what they teach. And then I'll send them an estimated quote just via email. And then I'll attach some applications and some different brochures about professional liability, and depending on therapeutic operations, then I might throw in some abuse and molestation coverage in there. Just a lot of different, information for, handouts for them to look at. And I can help them with the application over the phone, and then get that back to me, and then submit for rating and final approval. And it's usually pretty easy, but a lot of times it requires my assistance just to help them get through the questions, because it's hard to know what they're asking sometimes.
And that's so awesome that you see. That's what I think people need to hear that watch this, is they've tried to do it online and not actually talk to a real person.
Oh.
And so for them to be able to talk to you in person, then they can ask these questions, say, I don't understand, can you walk me through what exactly does this mean? And you'll do all that for them. And that's, I find when people, they don't know who to go to and they're confused, and I'll say, well, call this person. That's the great part, is they can call you and they'll say, I don't understand. Can you explain how this all works with this kind of insurance for my business? And I'm a trainer, but I'm working here and going here. How does this work with me traveling and the trailering part and all that? So you'll explain all that to them. And I think that's what people need. At least for me, I need that. I need to talk to a real person, because I don't always understand what I'm reading when I'm reading that kind of stuff.
Well, and a lot with insurance, the questions can be very repetitive sometimes. They ask the same thing a couple different times in different ways. And it's hard to know what they're asking, in every situation. So I always help people when they need it. So. And
you'll also do, so because you guys do so many states though, you'll also do complete farms, like a complete stable with the house and everything on it?
Yes, that's normally what we do. The larger the farm, the better. The more competitive we usually are. So like my biggest accounts, even though we're in Minnesota, my biggest accounts are in Texas and Virginia and California.
Oh, so, wow.
I write farms all over the country, and it's so easy today with technology, and people just email things back and forth, and Google, Earth, and we can pull a lot of information off different websites. And
so you don't have to go there to actually see the place?
Not as much anymore, no. And that's fine with a lot of people. Sometimes I will, local farm, I will go out and visit, but even my neighbors down the street, I hardly ever see them, because they're just too busy to have me over. They're just like, no, just send it out,
Yeah.
So it's good.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice. Awesome.
One thing I'm going to throw out there, speaking of whole farm insurance policies, is that where I see a lot of like farm owners and trainers, what they don't think about is when they're hauling horses for other people, they're charging by the mile, right? They're going to horse shows, and a lot of times they have their vehicles on a personal auto policy. That personal auto policy has a business use exclusion. So if they're going down the road and a car rolls out in front of them and they're driving a 10-horse rig with a truck, they're never going to stop in time. And there's going to be an accident. And a personal auto policy will exclude that if it's a business, and they're hauling horses for other people and charging for it. So people really need to look and get themselves a business auto policy.
Really?
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing I see with independent horse trainers and farm owners, is they don't think about the auto piece of it.
Wow. That's very interesting. Yeah, it's not, I hear, I hear about insurance, but I didn't realize about the difference if your vehicles are on a private, like if you have a private vehicle that's not part of the business.
Right. Well, it becomes a business use when you start charging, mileage for it.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure you have the right auto insurance too, with a business auto policy.
Do you have, okay, so can you just tell us anything like, give us some situations that that would maybe be something that you've seen someone do, and little changes that can make their, I think people are so fearful it's going to be so expensive with insurance. Oh, it's so expensive. What are some little things they can do to keep their rates maybe not going over and top? Like, do they have to have, you can get $1 million, $5 million coverage. What do you recommend, something, especially for someone just starting out that maybe doesn't have a huge facility, but they're training, or they're just, they're going to rent a little place and they only have like 10 horses there. Can they be over covered?
Well, you know what, on the farm policies, I don't know if you're asking, more just the trainer liability policy or a farm policy, but.
Well, I'm talking about like people that maybe board just like 5 horses, a smaller place, or a trainer who's just doing a few horses, Yeah.
Well, on the farms, what really drives the premium up on the farms, the liability is pretty cheap. Trainer or, on a farm policy, liability is typically not that high. What really drives the premium is the value of the buildings and the house and where you're located, because typically you have higher value structures, usually more than 5 miles away from a fire department, which is going to take longer for a fire truck to get there. And so insurance companies charge more for that, typically.
Oh, you mean if you're farther than 5 miles away from a fire department? Really?
Yeah, you're going to get a higher rate than somebody within 5 miles.
Oh,
so
we're close to one, so I guess that's good.
It keeps your rates down, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, but the other thing on farms is the big thing insurance companies are looking at is updates on, the roofs. They want to make sure things are, updated and not really old. Updated furnaces and heating systems, wiring, plumbing if it's really old. They come out and they do surveys on the farm, and we'll do inspections and make loss control recommendations as far as, do you have fire extinguishers that are serviceable and maintained on a regular basis? You don't have a bunch of extension cords laying around, plugged in multiple fans, causing a fire. You don't have, they don't want to see a lot of debris around and trees growing up next to buildings. They want to see pride of ownership in the property. Then they know you're taking good care of it. So
now, do you guys recommend, I know with our insurance, when we first signed on with them, we had to actually give them a copy. This last insurance carrier we've been with for like 7 years now, we had to give them a copy of our boarding contract. They came out, we had to have no smoking signs, exit signs, barn rules posted. Is that pretty standard for most insurance carriers?
Yep, very standard. It's routine. Right. Yeah. So
very good. That's so interesting. I hope I'm going to share this. I hope a lot of people that are watching it now, and people will share this. And I just think this is such a needed topic. It's so important, especially when you hear of things like people getting sued, horses breaking a leg, getting hurt. Things always look good when the barn is going well and the horses are healthy and everything is fine. But as soon as an accident happens, whether it's a human, whether it's a horse, or tragically something worse, like a barn fire, people start, after things settle, whether it's a day or two, people start wanting to know what happened. Why did that happen? Why did my horse break a leg? Why, who's at fault that my daughter fell off her horse and broke her arm? It's crazy, but people start getting things in their mind. And I can't stress enough when I tell people to have the right insurance, because it all looks good when everything is good, the sun's out and everything's working. But as soon as something goes haywire and someone gets hurt, things can go down south really fast.
Yeah.
And people, it's so important. And if they just do this part right, they'll sleep better. They won't have to worry. And people, it's not really as expensive as what they think it is. I think they think it's going to be really expensive, or they'll talk to someone out there who's not an insurance person, who's just someone out there, and they'll say, well, my insurance, you're always going to have someone out there that says, well, it's so expensive and I'm not paying that. And I always tell people, don't go there. Don't get yourself caught in that, don't go cheap. Do it right, and when you're planning your board rates and you're setting your fees, you include all that in there to cover the cost of it, but do it right for your own peace of mind. And so I hope I'm going to be sharing this all over the United States. I know we have some international friends that watch this too. I don't know how that works for insurance outside of the country, but I'm assuming it's kind of similar, wouldn't you say?
Yep. I just was I don't know if you want me to read a couple of things. I printed off a few claims that we had from a liability standpoint that might be interesting for people to hear.
Love it. I would love it. Please do. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, you brought up the dog bite situation earlier, about dogs. So I had an insured who, had events, he still has regular events at his farm. And even though he posted on the show bills and on everywhere, all over his farm, it says no dogs allowed. Somebody brought their dog, and it was a little dog, and it got in a fight with the farm owner's dog. And the lady bent down to try and separate her little dog with the lab and got her hand nicked. Well, of course, she sued him, and it didn't even puncture her skin. But she sued him and she was awarded $10,000. So
really?
So just really watch those dogs, especially, with your clients coming in on the premises. And then I had another person who fell off a horse during a riding lesson and sustained some injuries. And the farm owner always kept his liability release forms that people sign in the barn office. And when she sued him, he couldn't find it. So he is positive she went in the barn office and took her release form out of the drawer. Wow. And so he had nothing to go by. So when the attorneys asked for a copy of the release, he couldn't provide it. So he was found liable. They paid $130,000 because she fell off her own horse during a riding lesson.
Because she fell off her own horse?
Yep.
So now, did she board there? How does that work when you board there and you fall off your own horse?
Yep, she just said that he was instructing her to go too fast when she wasn't ready.
Wow.
Like to go, elope. So I always say, when you get those release forms signed, if possible, make electronic copies and store them, in your computer somewhere, or at least keep them out of the barn where people don't have access to them. I don't ever want to see that happen to anybody else again.
That's a really good thing to know. Do you recommend every year at the beginning of the year having new release forms signed?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so they're current.
Yep, and if you have those independent riding instructors on the farm, mark on the calendar when their policy renews. And follow that, 30 days ahead of time, and make sure you get a new copy of their insurance. Make sure it's still in force.
Wow.
Because you never know. I mean, they could have let it lapse. Not every insurance company is that good about providing the landowner proof that it was lapsed. It lapsed.
Yeah.
They have intentions to, but I've seen it happen where they don't. There's the craziest liability claim that I think I ever heard of was in Arizona, and it was a boarder on her own time, riding her own horse in an arena, and the horse tripped, she fell off, and she sued the farm owner for poor footing in the arena.
Oh, geez.
And she was awarded $1 million.
1 million?
Yeah. So
how is it that a barn owner can't fight that?
I know. I wasn't involved in the legal case, but that's how much she got. So it's just, you have to really be careful.
Yeah. Wow. That gives me goosebumps. That's just amazing. I can't even believe that. I hope and pray this opens some people's eyes to how important it is to have coverage.
Yep.
And even if you have to raise your rates a little, whether it's your boarding horses or your training, so be it if you have to raise your rates to cover it. But you know, it's so important because I always tell people, you have all the skin in the game. You have opened up your place. You're letting people come on your property. You've taken the risk in starting your business.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why not get this part of it, do it right, and make sure you're covered, because you could lose it so quickly.
Right.
Wow. That is amazing. That
You
is
know,
amazing.
yep. So, you know, make sure you have good, you know, rules established and that they're posted and that you follow through and treat everybody the same, you know.
Wow. Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. You're awesome, Debbie. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, sorry about the glitch at the beginning, but I am going to be sharing this all over, and this will end up going to all 50 states and even outside the country. And I want to thank you so much for your knowledge, your expertise, and I appreciate you being patient with Tricia and I with getting this live. And I hope one day down the road you'll join us again.
Yeah.
And, thank
I
you.
can talk insurance forever, so it's just get me going and I won't stop.
I love it. No, you know, that's how I feel about barn management. I could talk about it forever. And, you know, it's kind of one of the things in all the things in equine, barn management and cleaning stalls and all that kind of stuff is really not glamorous at all. But it's the heart of part of this industry. You know, you have to have boarding stables. And with that is you have to have insurance. It's the heart of it. You have to have some of these major things in order to keep the industry functioning properly, because not everyone can keep a horse on their own property.
Right.
And most people don't want to. They want to board with other people and have someone else take care of their animals. And that means you have to have the insurance and you have to have the stables. And trying to get people on board and trying to educate them and tell them that, you know, this isn't the world it was 30 or 40 years ago. You really need to protect yourself and do things right. And so I'm just so thankful you came on our show, our very first guest, and it was so awesome. You opened my eyes to some things I might have to check into with my insurance. And anyways, thank you. Have a blessed evening and week, and I'm sure you and I will be in touch.
Okay.
And it was so wonderful to have you, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. And remember, you can watch this anytime, listen to it as a podcast on probarnmanagement.com, on Facebook and YouTube, and I will have it out there to share. And wishing everyone a wonderful week. And God bless you, and thank you. We'll see you soon. Bye, Debbie. Thank you for joining.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.